In the annals of American history, there is no greater mystery than the fate of the lost colony of Roanoke. It's a story that has haunted historians and honestly captured the public imagination for over 400 years. A story of hope, of hardship, and of a group of more than 100 men, women, and children who, in the late 16th century, sailed across an ocean to build a new life, and then simply vanished from the face of the earth. For centuries, their disappearance has been attributed to everything from disease and famine to violent massacre. But what if the truth is something else entirely? What if the colony was never truly lost? What if all this time we've simply been looking in the wrong place? Join us as we investigate the new evidence that is finally solving America's oldest unsolved mystery. So, our story begins in 1587. Under a charter from Queen Elizabeth I, Sir Walter Raleigh financed an ambitious attempt to establish the first permanent English settlement in North America. Now, this was actually the third voyage Raleigh had sponsored. A previous military expedition in 1585 had ended in failure after relations with the local Algonquian-speaking tribes soured, culminating, rather grimly, in the English beheading a local chief. This new attempt, however, was different. It was to be a civilian colony, comprised of families who were genuinely seeking to put down roots. There were 117 settlers in all, led by Governor John White, an artist and cartographer who had documented the previous voyages. Among the group was White's own pregnant daughter, Eleanor Dare, and her husband, Ananias. Their intended destination was the Chesapeake Bay, which was thought to be a more promising location than Roanoke Island. But after stopping at Roanoke in July to check on a small garrison left behind from the 1585 expedition, the ship's pilot, Simon Fernandez, refused to sail any further. In what amounted to a mutiny, he forced the colonists to disembark on Roanoke Island, a place, it must be said, where the English were already distrusted. Forced to make the best of a bad situation, the settlers repaired the abandoned fort and began their new lives. On August 18, 1587, Eleanor Dare gave birth to a daughter, Virginia, the first English child born in the New World. But, the colony was in a pretty precarious position. They had arrived too late in the season to plant crops, and, well, their supplies were dwindling. Desperate, the colonists persuaded a rather reluctant Governor White to return to England to gather reinforcements and provisions. It was a journey he honestly expected to be swift. He would never see his family or any of the other colonists ever again. Before he left, they agreed on a plan. If the colonists had to move, they would carve their new location into a tree. And if they were in distress, they would carve a Maltese cross above the name. John White's return to Roanoke was, well, calamitously delayed. England's war with Spain, which reached its peak with the attack of the Spanish Armada in 1588, meant that all available ships were pressed into military service. It was not until August of 1590, 3 long years later, that White was finally able to make his way back to the colony. On August 18th, his granddaughter Virginia's 3rd birthday, he landed on Roanoke Island. He found the settlement completely deserted. The houses had been carefully dismantled and removed, not ransacked or burned. There were no signs of a battle and no human remains. It was as if the entire population had simply packed up and left. Then he found the clue. Carved into a wooden post of the fort's palisade was a single cryptic word, CROATOAN. The letters CRO were also carved into a nearby tree. Crucially, there was no Maltese cross. This was not a sign of distress. It was a message. White knew exactly what it meant. Croatoan was the name of a nearby island, now known as Hatteras Island, located about 50 miles to the south. It was the home of the Croatoan people, a Native American tribe led by a chief named Manteo, who had been a steadfast ally to the English, even traveling to England and returning with them. The message seemed clear. The colonists had moved to Croatoan Island to live with their allies. But White was never able to confirm this. A powerful storm began to brew, and the captain of his ship, fearing for the vessel's safety, refused to make the journey south. Forced to abandon the search, White sailed back to England, his heart broken. And so the mystery of the lost colony was born. For the next 4 centuries, speculation ran wild. Were they killed by hostile tribes, wiped out by a hurricane or disease? Did they attempt to sail back to England on their own and were lost at sea? The story became a legend, a ghost story whispered on the Outer Banks of North Carolina, but the simplest explanation, the one John White himself believed, was largely ignored. For centuries, the search for the lost colony focused almost exclusively on Roanoke Island itself. But in recent decades, archaeologists have finally started to follow the clue the colonists left behind. Two organizations, the First Colony Foundation and the Croatoan Archaeological Society, have led the charge, conducting extensive excavations on Hatteras Island, the historical Croatoan, and at inland sites on the mainland. And what they have found is, well, rewriting the story of the lost colony. At sites on Hatteras Island, archaeologists have unearthed a trove of late 16th century European artifacts, not in an English settlement, but mixed directly in with the remains of Native American villages. They have found pieces of English pottery, parts of guns, a slate writing tablet with a lead pencil, and even a 10-carat gold signet ring engraved with a prancing lion or horse, an object that would have belonged to an English nobleman. Most compellingly, in 2025, archaeologists uncovered, well, buckets of hammer scale, a flaky byproduct of traditional iron blacksmithing. The local tribes did not practice this kind of metalworking. The presence of this industrial waste buried deep in a 16th century native settlement is powerful evidence of English smiths living and working alongside the Croatoan people for an extended period. Meanwhile, researchers with the First Colony Foundation have been investigating a location 50 miles inland near a former Native American village called Metaquem. This site was identified after a re-examination of one of John White's maps, which interestingly had a symbol for a fort hidden under a patch of paper. At this inland site, they have found more shards of English pottery, specifically a type known as borderware, which was common among the Roanoke colonists. The evidence suggests that a small group of settlers, perhaps a single family, moved inland to live with another allied tribe, the Roanoke. The picture that emerges from this new archaeological evidence is clear, and well, it really dismantles the 400-year-old myth of a vanishing. The Roanoke colonists were not lost, they were survivors. Facing starvation and the uncertainty of White's return, they made a logical choice. They split up. The main body of the group, likely over 90 people, went to live with their trusted allies, the Croatoan people on Hatteras Island. They left a clear message indicating their destination. Smaller groups may have moved inland to live with other friendly tribes. They did not vanish, they assimilated, they integrated into Native American society, sharing their tools, their skills, and, well, their lives. The blending of European artifacts with native pottery tells a story not of disappearance, but of two cultures coming together. This was not an uncommon occurrence in colonial America, it was a practical survival strategy. The so-called mystery was really created not by the original colonists, but by the failures of those who came after them. John White's inability to search Croatoan, and then, later on, the Jamestown colonists' reports of a massacre, most likely referring to a totally separate, later conflict. Well, these things just muddied the waters. The romanticized narrative of a lost colony became, far more compelling than the rather mundane reality of assimilation. The evidence coming out of the ground honestly confirms what should have been obvious all along. The colonists told us exactly where they were going. They carved it right there on a post, Croatoan. It wasn't some cryptic clue. It was quite simply an address, a forwarding address that for 4 centuries no one really bothered to fully investigate. The story of Roanoke? Well, it's no longer a ghost story, it's a story of adaptation, of resilience, and of the complex, often forgotten history of cultural exchange between European settlers and the indigenous peoples of North America. The colony wasn't lost, it was found. Uncovering the truth behind legends like the Lost Colony is, honestly, our mission here at Kronos Uncovered. If this investigation has changed the way you see this piece of history, be sure to subscribe and join our community of curious minds. And don't forget to watch our previous videos where we explored the true story of the war we lost to Birds Australia's bizarre Great Emu War and the story of the forgotten god more powerful than Zeus.